Level up your success with the ICABA World Network, where accomplished Black professionals and entrepreneurs have created a thriving global ecosystem built from valuable connections and impactful collaborations. Be a part of a trusted network that uplifts, inspires, and enhances your success. Join like-minded and leading Black professionals to foster meaningful relationships, unlock opportunities, and access the resources you need to thrive in your career, business, and life. Go to ICABAWorldNetwork.com and join today.
Here we go. Okay. Hello. It is Wednesday, October 27th. Welcome to Black Professionals Month. Another day, another series of fantastic sessions. And we're going to start right now with a fantastic session with Dr. Patrice Berry. So let me take just a few seconds to read her fantastic bio. Dr. Patrice Berry is a licensed clinical psychologist with over 15 years of clinical experience. She provides outpatient therapy at her private practice, Four Rivers Psychological Services, LLC. She specializes in treating children, families, and adults with histories of trauma, adoption, depression, and anxiety. As a speaker, she provides educational training on mental health awareness, integrating faith and mental health, and the impact of racism on marginalized communities. She also provides educational information on social media, including TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram. She also recently launched her new book, Turning Crisis into Clarity: How to Survive or Thrive in the Midst of Uncertainty. And don't we need to learn about that? So without further ado, I will turn the virtual stage, over to Dr. Patrice Berry.
Thank you so much. I am so glad to be here, and I'm just going to pull up my presentation really quick. And today's topic is my book title, Turning Crisis into Clarity: How to Survive or Thrive in the Midst of Uncertainty. And really, how I got to this book was really 2020. And before everything shut down in March of 2020, there had already been some things happening within my life, within my business, because I was working for a large organization, and I had to lay off staff for the very first time ever, which was extremely painful due to Medicaid changes. But for the first time, I thought about what I would do if I was not working for that agency. And one of the big things that can really help when you're in the midst of a crisis is preparation. And we can't prepare for everything. You can't have every single scenario lined out, but there were some hints and signs that I might not be with that agency long term. And so when March of 2020 came and my salaried position ended, they offered a chance to stay with them. But a door was open for me to move on. And that's when I launched my private practice and really took a leap of faith. And so part one of the book is all about survival, because in the midst of a crisis, one of the first things we need to do is find peace. I give an analogy of driving in a storm, and it's interesting that that Denise has a nor'easter like right there. And so when you're in the middle of a storm, you have to acknowledge, number one, I am in a storm. And so I might need to adjust. I might need to do some things a little bit different. And when we're in a storm, when we're in a crisis, that can open some old wounds. So I might need to, something that happened a while back, I might think that, okay, that's not an issue anymore, but something may happen that reopens some of those wounds. And some signs that some of those old wounds have maybe been reopened is that I'm getting irritable for no reason. And this topic or this situation just seems really sensitive. Because when something is healed, when you touch it, it really doesn't hurt, but it can reopen, and maybe I need to give it some attention. Maybe I need to take a look at it again. And so chapter 3 is all about surviving uncertainty, because in a crisis, we are not going to know everything. And I'm going to get to it on the second slide, but in the middle of a crisis, our brain goes into survival mode. But that survival mode shuts down our thinking brain. And so one of the best things that we can do in those moments is to accept, okay, this is what it is. And now I need to calm my nervous system, because in that moment, your eyes get big, your heart starts beating fast, you go into survival mode, but I might not make the best decisions. So with that situation I was talking about earlier, where that position ended, I did have an opportunity to stay at that job, but I would have had to sacrifice my peace. So there was a chance to stay comfortable, but it would have meant being on call 24/7 and going back into a position that I know I did not like before, and that I likely would not stay at long term. The one thing that I'll mention is that I was in a place of privilege where I have a partner that had a full-time job, had full-time benefits. So I was in a place to the uncertainty that was coming, it was not life-threatening. We were going to be okay. Losing, me not having a paycheck while I set up the business. But I'm very grateful that within 3 months, I was able to replace that salary, just by doing the thing that I had already been doing. And so sometimes a crisis or that obstacle becomes the way that puts us on the path that we were destined to be on. Because I don't think I would have left that job the way I did, if it hadn't been for everything that happened starting in March of 2020. And I loved my job. I was happy. I enjoyed the people that I worked with. I ran a school-based counseling program in 14 middle and high schools, including an alternative school and a therapeutic school. But because of that role, I had to be very careful what I said, and I would not be able to have the freedom that I have to be on social media, to speak out about racial injustice and the things that are really important and near and dear to my heart if I had stayed at that other position. And so sometimes uncertainty, there might be a way through it, because sometimes we want to avoid it. How can I make everything predictable? How can I make when a piece of it may just have to be accepted? One of my favorite authors is Viktor Frankl. He is a Holocaust survivor and a psychiatrist, and he wrote a book, Man's Search for Meaning. And in it, he talks about how a person can survive almost any what if they have a why. And so how do you turn this pain into purpose? Because in the midst of the pain, if there's pain and no purpose, then it feels like torture. It's not, I'm not going to understand why. I'm going to have all these questions. But if I can find my why in the middle of it, then that can help guide me through those difficult times when things aren't looking right, when things aren't adding up, and I'm starting to face some of these obstacles. Having that purpose can really help guide someone through it. This was one of my favorite chapters, avoiding self-sabotage and imposter syndrome, because I am a big procrastinator. Like I I feel like I get my best work done at the last minute, but I can like prepare a little better sometimes. And so even the journey to writing the book, I was coming right up on a major deadline, and I had to get it done. And so when I was writing this chapter, I share a lot in it about my own struggle with self-sabotage. Sometimes I can get in my own way. The things that I love, like social media, can sometimes be a distraction. It can keep me from what I need to do as well if I'm not being intentional. And so is it self-care or is it avoidance? And self-care is where I'm caring for myself. I am feeding myself. So taking that nap, taking that break, I wake up motivated. I am able to then accomplish these goals versus distraction and avoidance is when I'm taking that break, but it is setting me behind. And now I'm not in a good space and I'm not feeling more creative. Really, my stress and anxiety is even higher. Then that's when it's likely more of a self-sabotage behavior versus an act of self-care. And then imposter syndrome. And one of my favorite ways to talk about imposter syndrome is that it's where a person sees themselves as small when they are actually really like they're actually great, and they're not seeing their own worth, they're not seeing their own value, and they're often comparing themselves negatively to other people. And in the middle of a crisis, so I couldn't, as a mom, I have a 4-year-old son. So as a mom, I couldn't compare what I did for our family and what my husband did for our family. I couldn't compare that to what my best friend did with her family, because she did what worked well for her, which was she's a stay-at-home mom, she's homeschooling her kids, and that was what worked best for her. For me, we kept our child in daycare throughout this pandemic, which at times that made people's like, but in order for me to do my job, I could not have a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old. I think when all this started, he was about 2.5. I couldn't have him running around at home because he needed supervision. And he is our only child, and he does better when he is around other kids and when he's around other peers. And so I think each person has to make the decision that works best for their family and not judge themselves, letting go of some of that shame and guilt throughout that process. Helpers need help too. This is, I have a YouTube video on this topic as well, where it talks about vulnerability. Often the people that are serving, those servant leaders, those people that give, those CEOs, those people that are they are the one that everybody comes to, that strong friend is often the one that has the most difficulty asking for help and support. And being able to still, when I need something. So as a psychologist, one of the best decisions I ever made was finding the right therapist for me. So I am a better therapist because I have done my work and done my therapy. That wounded people can accidentally wound people. And so making sure that even as a helper, even as somebody that's pouring into other people, you shouldn't give from an empty well. You shouldn't go, because often we prioritize work and we reward work and we don't talk about rest. And it is extremely important that people engage in their own self-care and that they take care of themselves. Part 2 moves into the thriving chapters. So part 1, all about survival. We're just going to get through it. We're just going to do what we can to get through it. And then for people that are able to move into some of the thriving, because I feel like I really thrived in the midst of this, and I don't judge. So if what one person does is survive, yay, I'm glad we're getting through it. Just do what you can with what you have, reaching out for help and support when you need it. And then for some people, they are able to thrive. So 2020 was actually one of the best years. I had some of the highest highs and some of the lowest lows, because I did not think. So when I set off to start my business, I did not think that it would take 3 to 4 months to be at to have a six-figure practice. I honestly thought it was going to take a lot longer to build up to that place. I didn't realize, and so really, um, um, being able to accept that uncertainty of stepping out, it really did help push for me personally into a moment of thriving. And so there are some research. So they have done research on resilience. As a psychologist, I know the things that can help people do better after something negative happens. One of those big things is social connection. And that's why it's so important to connect with others as best you can during these times, because isolation will often keep us in that survival mode. And so being able to connect, having supports, being able to have a growth mindset. So a growth mindset says that, when something negative happens, okay, what can I learn from this? And a fixed mindset says, this negative thing happened. I knew it wouldn't work out. I knew I shouldn't have done that. A fixed mindset focuses on the lack. A growth mindset focuses on the opportunity. Holistic wellness. So healing comes a lot of different ways. And so talking about our spiritual functioning, our emotional functioning, our physical functioning. So for me, emotionally, I was doing okay, but physically, So physically, I need to, start being more active. I need to be mindful of the coping strategies that I'm using. And so making sure that that a person has balance. No one of those things are any more, like, I think you have to find some balance. You'll never have perfect balance. I don't think anything will ever be like perfectly balanced, but when my emotional health is off, that can affect my physical health. And when my physical health is off, that can affect just that all of these different parts of ourselves are connected, and we need to address the whole. And most people are good at one of those. And so in the book, I have a chart where people can kind of rate in a crisis. How can I rate myself on these 7 dimensions of wellness? I think in the book I have 6, because the 7th dimension is your environment. And so how do I do in these different areas of wellness in the midst of a crisis? I always take a breath with this one, because sitting with people in the midst of their pain, in the midst of their grief and loss, I don't think that in our culture that we always do a great job of that. I think sometimes we try to push people through their journey way too quickly. And I believe it's my mom. So my mom is Johnny Lloyd. I believe she was the one that said, there is no time limit on grief. We don't get to say how long somebody gets to grieve. And so being able to step back and give people space. And I have a chart where I talk about some helpful and unhelpful things to say when somebody is grieving. For me personally, I try not to say, I'm sorry for your loss if I don't know what they have lost, because everybody's so, I want to give them space, because sometimes saying something that I'm trying to make them feel better too fast doesn't give a person the space to really feel how they're doing. And so letting people know it's okay to not be okay. I'm here for you. So if in our family, we just heard about a loss recently, and just being able to say, hey, I'm here if you need anything. I'm available to talk. And then checking up on people about 6 months later, a year later, because often everybody checks on somebody that's grieving within that first month. that person gets a ton, like sometimes it's overwhelming the amount of support somebody gets at first. But then over time, it can get to be a little bit more difficult. Forgiveness is the next chapter. And I love the concept of forgiveness. And we talk about what it is and what it's not. So forgiveness is not reconciliation. Forgiveness is not approving what happened. Forgiveness is not saying that that person is still going to be in my life. I can forget. Forgiveness is more about not holding myself hostage to someone else's behavior. So me being able to move forward, and that's a journey. It's an emotional journey, but and that it can take time. I did my dissertation on forgiveness in aggressive children, and we looked at how teaching children about forgiveness could help with them, like not trying to get back at the other person. Okay, you did this to me, now I need to hurt you. Well, because you hurt me, that does not give me the right to hurt you, but I can go report whatever happened, or I can then use whatever things that are available to me. You may have consequences for whatever you did, but just that often, as in order to thrive, I can't hold on to everything. I need to find ways to move forward through that pain. I work with children and families. That is a large part of my work. And I really like talking with parents about raising resilient children. Just recently, the American Academy of Pediatrics declared a mental health crisis for our children, that right now, a lot of children are really struggling. And when I think about it, a big part of that, I think, is their last normal school year was the 2018 to 2019 school year. Our kids have been impacted, but depending on how the family responds. So there are things that we can do to help and support children. And we talk about some of those tools. And then chapter 12 is all about additional resources. I love, love, love resources. And for anybody that wants to find a therapist, if they want to, I talk about difference between a therapist and a coach, because some people don't need therapy. Some people need a coach would be just fine. And so being able to navigate some of those processes, I have some tools for that. Our business in crisis, since this is Black Professionals Month, I want to talk about how a crisis can either trigger chaos, or we can get some clarity based on how we perceive and adapt to events, manage our available resources, embrace our ability to ask for help and support when needed, focus on what is in our control, and prioritize what is urgent and important. And so that's one of the tips from that procrastination chapter, or that self-sabotage. Because sometimes we will have that shiny object syndrome where all these other things like, oh, I could be doing this. I could be doing this. Oh, I could launch this business. Within this time frame, I did launch a second business once my first business was thriving and was in a healthy space. Social media opened a door for speaking engagements, and professionally, I wanted to protect my practice and have another legal business to be able to run my social media, my speaking, my coaching. And so, but I didn't need to do that in March of 2020. I didn't need to try to launch two brand new businesses at the exact same time. And so being able, what is urgent and what is important. I'm taking another breath here, because letting go of the things that are out of our control. So in the middle of a crisis, there are going to be things that are not within my control. And then finding felt safety. So when we are stressed, our brain goes into survival mode. And so when I'm not stressed, my prefrontal cortex is active and my entire brain is functioning and working the way that it's supposed to. And when I am stressed, that amygdala, that almond shaped part of my brain that's right here, it gets real happy, and the emotions take over. Because if a bear is chasing me, I don't need my thinking brain. I don't need to think, what color is that bear? Is that a nice bear? Like, no, like you just need to react and you just need to run. But there will be times when something may trigger that's not a immediate life or death thing, but my body and brain might react as though it is. And so I need to calm the brain before I make any decisions, so that I can be able to move forward. Anxiety wants certainty and control. Anxiety is not bad. Stress is not bad. And so that's why, because there is good stress. Good stress is me making sure that I know I have 5 minutes left. So making sure that I stay on time, that's good stress. Bad stress would be if, because I'm so focused on my last 5 minutes, that now I can't think. And now I have all of these other things going on and I'm not able to perform. That would be an example of bad stress. The noise of stress and what it can do within our body and brain. And we've already talked about how it can trigger anxiety. It can cause annoyance and mood shifts. We have increased production of stress hormones. That's why physical activity can be really helpful in lowering some of those stress hormones. Also crying. So if anybody ever just gets this intense urge to cry, sometimes watching a sad movie, sometimes just letting yourself get it out. Because when we researchers looked at sad tears or like stress tears, and they had some of that cortisol in it, that crying it out really does work. And so being able to feel those emotions. Now, I don't want to lose it in Target. So that's always my thing. I don't want to lose it in Target. Yes, I want to. So that's at home in my car, in a bathroom, but not in like the food section at Target. It can cause increased heart rate, and so hypertension. It can cause a lot of different heart and vascular, blood pressure, increased adrenaline, changes in the immune system. So noise of stress. So being overly stressed chronically, toxic stress, lowers our ability to fight infections, which is not good. And so that's where managing stress becomes extremely important. That we talked about, that increased heart rate, difficulties with sleep. It can trigger symptoms, especially if somebody has a history of negative life events. Those things can come back up. And then also it can delay. To a child that has an overly stressed brain, they may have more difficulty learning. And so because that brain is just trying to survive, when we're in survival mode, we can't learn. And so I like working with schools and teachers about how they can help kids have regulated bodies and regulated brains so that they can be able to learn. And so as we navigate that storm, we want to acknowledge where we are, be vulnerable, and then also remember that self-care is not selfish. It is the prerequisite. One of my friends over on TikTok, my destination, she talks about the fact that we often reward ourselves when we're busy, and we don't reward ourselves for rest. And so rest is the prerequisite. It is not the reward. And then we might need to reframe our thoughts. And so here are some common thought traps. All or nothing thinking is that black or white. Things are either all good or all bad. Mental filter. So some people have these colored glasses where they see everything as negative. Sometimes we jump to conclusions. So something happens, and then so my friend doesn't answer the phone call, and I immediately think, oh my gosh, like she must hate me. No, take a breath. She might be busy. So I don't want to immediately jump to negative conclusions. Emotional reasoning, labeling, using words like, oh, I'm so stupid, I'm this, I'm that, and using negative words to immediately label ourselves. Overgeneralizing. So just because I had one obstacle, that doesn't mean that like the rest of my life, or that all these other negative things are going to happen. Sometimes we disqualify the positive, where we, even in the midst of good things happening, because when you're in survival brain, your brain often overlooks the good. And that is where practicing gratitude can be extremely important. Magnification, either sometimes we make things way too big, we make the bad way too big, or we minimize the good. We want to let go of those shoulds. So I try to turn my shoulds, instead of thinking, oh, I should have washed the dishes, I turn it into, I want to wash the dishes. Turn your shoulds into I want to. Because then a should carries judgment. A should often makes somebody like, oh, I should. Oh, like they're normally feeling bad with themselves, instead of focusing on, okay, so I want to work towards having the kitchen be cleaner, and then doing behaviors to actually act on that. And some people personalize things, where always thinking it's all my fault. And so I'm super glad. I appreciate y'all having me here. If y'all have any questions, this is the time where, if anyone has questions, I can answer those.
Well, let me just start by saying I love the turn your shoulds into I want tos. I totally have to remember that one, because I think you're right. There's a mental empowerment. I don't know if that's the right phrase to use, when you just shift your mindset into saying, turning something you would normally say into saying it a different way. It's amazing how empowering that shift is.
And so shoulds, and that is something that I practice. So everything I talk about, these are things that I actively practice. Everything that's in the book, those are things that I have worked through myself, that I continue to work through. And so shoulds often have a judgment with it. And when I'm judging myself, I'm often holding myself to a standard that I wouldn't hold someone else to. So if I go over to my friend's house and, and there are like a few dishes in her sink, I'm not gonna be like, oh, you knew I was coming and you didn't, like, I'm not gonna feel. But if she's coming over to my house, it's like, oh, I should have the, and so and then I'll admit, I do make sure the bathrooms have to be clean. Like, I'm gonna make sure the bathrooms are together, but I'm not going to like overly focus and be overly stressed, so that then when my friend gets here, now I'm kind of agitated because, I had to do all this work for her, and I'm not able to enjoy that moment or enjoy that time. And so if I decide to do it, it's not because I should have, it's because I wanted to. So it comes from a deeper space. Sharon,
Yes.
Sorry.
Okay, Johnny, yes. Oh, was that Johnny? Who was that? Oh, Sharon, yeah, Sharon. Hey, Sharon.
Hi, can I ask a question?
Please.
Hi, Patrice, I think that was.
Oh,
You're
you went
muted.
to mute again. You went to mute.
You're
Sharon.
muted. Yeah.
Technology.
I'm sorry, duh. Can everybody hear me now?
Yes.
I think that was an excellent presentation, Patrice, and particularly being in the medical field. I think that you broke the brain function down really well. I have to steal some of that from you. I'm sorry I came to the presentation late. You keep talking about your book, but interestingly enough, given that this is Black Professionals Month, thank you. But the other thing is that the interesting thing is that every time I see other people talk about their books, that the screen in the back is usually their book. So my humble suggestion for you is maybe your screensaver in the back should be your book, but
it might very well be, Sharon, if it weren't for Black Professionals Month, sending her the background. I have no idea, but I think it's a good point. I have in my real background my book on a stand, so that all of my Zoom meetings, aside from Black Professionals Month, yes, have my book on a stand in the background. So that's a good point, though.
Right, but
I think, are you muted again?
No, well, we can't.
Something
hear her
happened.
With the sound.
but she's not muted though.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
It's weird.
If you got a phone call, sometimes if you get a phone call, the sound, I'm not sure.
All right. Any other questions while we're trying to figure out Sharon's audio? Johnny.
the one thing I'll say is that during the time when she was writing the book, as a, not just because I'm a proud parent, and I am, but because this is the other side of it, it's really, it really is power packed. It's actually a reference to so many things that we deal with as women, or we deal with as people. And so the thing that I found out so beautiful about it is the fact that it touches on so many things. And it's a reference, it's a tool to be used, because right now, as we go through this transformation that we're going through in the middle of all of this stuff that's happening, we really do need tools to help us emotionally, physically, spiritually. And the one thing that I keep on, we talked about a little bit earlier today, and is the statement of rest. I have never looked at rest as a reward, as a award or a reward. It was like, okay, when I die, I'll rest. Like I'm gonna keep on going until I die or something. However, I have shifted and know that rest is a part of the natural thing I need to do to replenish me. So yeah, so I'm hoping Sharon is available. Go ahead, Sharon.
Looks like she is. Looks like she is. Thank you for that, Johnny.
Can everybody hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you, Sharon.
Okay. Thank you. I just want to say it was a good presentation, and I did get the name of the book in the chat, and I think I will be recommending it to my patients. Thank you so very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you. And I write it at a level. So I received a lot of positive feedback. I'm currently recording the audiobook now. I don't read books. I listen to audiobooks. And so I'm recording that part too, but the book is so it's a reference. And so having the physical copy makes it a lot easier. But making mental health, so normalizing mental wellness, and it is health. Mental health is health, because often, especially as Black people, because this is Black Professionals Month, often we will go to the medical doctor, and therapy has not always been a safe place for us. And so I am almost 40 years old, and the first counselor I went to, she wasn't the right fit for me. She wasn't. And so that's why I try to be really vulnerable and share, like, hey, if you have a bad experience, it might be that person, or here's some questions you can ask to maybe weed out who might be the right fit for you. Here's some tips and tools. It doesn't have to be a psychologist if you want therapy. So a psychologist and a licensed clinical social worker, we both receive similar, like, I'm not a better therapist than the social worker that I rent the office from. Like, she's a phenomenal play therapist, and but I do psychological testing. The thing that makes me different as a psychologist is that I have the ability to do psychological testing. And there's a lot of this navigating insurance, navigating, pastoral care. So for some people, they're able to get supports through their church, and it's not a clinical, it's not to the level of needing medical intervention, but just needing a little bit of extra support and using those natural resources that are already there.
How did you get into the field?
So I had a bad experience in middle school where my guidance counselor did not hold space. She asked me some questions in a way that did not where it made me want to work with kids that were in foster care, that had been through, that did have difficult homes. And that's what I did for a long time. So I am also an adoption competent therapist. I work with a lot of adoptive families and adult adoptees, and I've worked with some birth families. And so really my heart and passion for mental health came out of just knowing that we needed more Black psychologists. We needed more Black therapists, people that could understand it from a different perspective. So my client, sometimes I'll have a morning client that has a bonnet on, but like, I know, like I'd rather her be on time with her bonnet than be late and her hair looks amazing. It's like, like just log on, we're good. Because I saw some other therapists in a therapy group complaining that clients were logging on and they had, their hair wrapped, and it's like, no, like that's kind of a cultural thing. Like that's okay. And I see people sometimes complaining about clients eating in session. Well, sometimes I'm meeting with people during their lunch break, and I don't want them to starve all day. And sometimes I even offer like, hey, if you're more comfortable with me eating too, I will eat with you. And so providing space for people. Growing up, I was always, and it's that typical, people liked to come to me. People liked to share with me. Adults. I was 14 years old, and I would have adults coming to me for advice and things. Because I would always be in spaces with my mom. My mom always let me know that my voice mattered, and that because my age didn't prohibit me from speaking in certain settings. I just had to, be respectful and all of that. But really it came out of seeing a need, and just wanting to be a safe space. So I love what I do. The clients that I'm able to sit with, I work with individuals that have severe mental health issues, that are some people that they've been hospitalized. They might have really negative thoughts, and I validate, I don't judge them. And so giving that safe space, that can honestly help save someone's life. And being able to be that space, I just, it's something that I enjoy. But I do not take it on. So I think the boundaries are extremely important. And that's what I like to help teach nurses and doctors and teachers. And I think it's easier for me because, like, as a medical doctor, it's harder because they are physically doing what's needed to help heal someone. For my work, my client we have to partner together, and then I give them the information, and then they do the work. And so I'm just not taking on their stuff. When I was younger, when I first started, I would take a lot of the client stuff home, and I had to really work on just being able to leave it. That me taking it didn't help the client. Like, it really just stressed me out, and it didn't help them at all. And once I realized that, it's like, okay, like, I'm a better therapist if I'm, finding ways to breathe through it, regulating my body. One of the best trainings I ever attended was by Dr. Eric Gentry, and he does trainings on compassion fatigue. And he talks about stress is the physiological response. It's not always the event. It's the event plus a physiological response. And so being able to regulate the physical response can often help lower the amount of stress that somebody experiences, which is why I breathe. As I feel my tension, as I feel my body start to tense or anything, I am constantly regulating my own body, just so I can be a space for others.
I need to learn how to do that, because I'm awful at managing stress and breathing. And yeah, we can make this whole therapy session and I would just completely talk your ear off.
Only if I have your insurance information, it's one-on-one, it's a whole thing. It's a whole thing.
No, it's true. Yeah, there's a lot of stress right now.
Sharon has a question before we close.
Okay. Hey,
yes. As a physician, I have had struggles convincing, sometimes cajoling, my African American patients to get therapy, even though it's clearly needed. As you know, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of stigma. So do you have any tips that a medical provider like me can use to kind of get someone over that bridge?
Therapy is not for crazy people. I have a big, it's called a DSM-5. It's right here. I have a big diagnostic and statistical manual. A person may be a lot of things. Crazy is not one of them. People don't go to therapy because they're crazy. People go to therapy because they've reached the end of their rope. They need some tools. They need some resources. They've done all they can do. They've prayed. They've done all. Because I think sometimes, especially within the Black community, especially people that are religious as well, they view therapy as a lack of faith, when really it takes faith to go. It takes faith to believe that there is healing, that a person can be or feel better. And so those are some of my tips. I have a ton of resources over on YouTube. I am a content creator over on TikTok, and I put things out on Instagram. And so I think because that's often when I'm working with Black clients, they're typically worried about what is my family going to think, when really we are a race of people that you could go to therapy just for like living in America. Like that's like enough. Like that's like just like, especially, and then if you work in corporate America, like not like, because I experienced racism working within a company that I loved. And so I think, but, and then finding a provider that can provide a safe, because everybody isn't, and I did a video the other day that just because therapist is Black doesn't mean they're going to get you. And so like, you still have to find the right person, a person that's going to be competent in what you do. And so I do have some tools and resources out there. My email address is drpatriceberry@gmail.com.
Okay. And I think your information is on the BPM website.
Yes.
Yeah, your contact information, Sharon.
And TikTok is amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
TikTok is off the chart. So anyway,
All right.
I know we're
gonna
through.
end it-
Thanks, Denise.
Yes, we're going to end it here because I saw Abdul come in and he left, and he's our next speaker. So I'm sure he'll pop back in. So we're going to end this session. Thank you, Dr. Patrice Berry, for such an enlightening and inspiring and helpful session. Thank you so much for being here, Black Professionals Month. And thank you for being here, ladies, watching it live, and those of you who are watching the replay. Appreciate you. All right.
Thank you.
So
Have
see
a
you
good
next
day.
time. Okay. Bye,
Thank
guys.
you.